be on Docker Compose. So sorry about that. Okay, so our quote of the day today is be tolerant with others, but strict with yourself. I guess that is so self-explanatory. Like you be more hard on yourself, not more hard, but follow your own doing. Yeah. Our agenda for today is the icebreaker, and then we go through the meeting expectations and more about our community. And if you have any questions, you will ask in the chat box, or you can just like raise your hand, and then we'll you'll be given a chance to ask the question. So on the icebreaker, there's a poll on the bottom right of the screen, if I'm not wrong. Kadima,
Yes.
the poll is already up, right?
Yeah, so there is a poll on the Google Meet where you can see some shapes, a triangle, a square, and a circle. Click on that, and I believe you should see the poll there. Can you see that? You can't see the poll?
I don't think there's a poll.
Okay, there is a poll on my end.
I know maybe the others can confirm if you can see a poll.
Hello, Kadima.
Yes, yes.
We can't see the poll. Actually, there's
Yeah.
it has just launched.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. I realized that they had not launched. So there are some questions there. Back to
Yeah.
you,
So
Ivy.
the first question. Thank you, Sam. The first question is, which lie do you tell people the most? So you can just vote on the one that you tell the most. On the 4 questions, you can just answer, and then we see what people are going to vote the most. So go over to the bottom right. There's shapes at the corner, and then you'll see polls where you're going to vote in on the questions. Let's engage on the polls. Sam, you have to tell me if people are, are voting, because I don't think I can see the votes.
Yes, people are filling in the polls. So far, we have about 14 people who have voted.
Yeah, that's halfway. So let's engage on the polls to see. What lie do you tell the most? Which embarrassing thing are you most likely to do? Do you multitask when attending an online meeting? And have you ever interacted with Docker?
Yeah, they are filling in. So for those who are joining, we have a poll. So you can go to the poll section and participate in the poll. The poll is some shapes that you can see: a square, a triangle, and a circle at the bottom right of your Google Meet. I think a good number voted.
Okay, so On the first question, maybe you can tell us which vote has been the most. Which lie do most people tell?
So the one that has won for the first question is 5 more minutes.
Yeah, we are living up to our Kenyan names.
Then
What about which embarrassing thing are you most likely to do?
text the wrong person, add more votes.
Oh, okay. Uh, do you multitask when attending an online meeting?
Yes, I'm guilty. Has more votes.
Well, for today, try as much as possible to be no, I am 100% focused because it is a very nice session that you're going to have today. So put your full attention to it. What about the last question?
So most people have used Docker before.
Okay, thank you so much, Sam. So for the people who have not used Docker before, this will be a learning starting a starting point for you, maybe or maybe not. And for those who have ever used Docker before, yeah, it will be more knowledge gain to you. So we have finished our icebreaker, and what to expect of you in the meeting today is you mute yourself when you're not speaking. Raise your hand if you want to speak. Use the chat box to write your comments and questions. Be respectful, be curious. Um, so, about the community, our mission as a community is to create a supportive and inclusive community that values diversity and supports learning and growth. Our vision is to be a leading DevOps community in Nairobi and beyond, driving innovation and empowering professionals to excel in their careers. Um, so this is our whole team. Samuel Kadima is our founder. Mamoon is our assistant director. Masilin Mochama is the community outreach manager. Samson Kalume is the program lead. Ian Rotich is the treasurer and the assistant community outreach manager. Alvin Dungu is the project lead. Emma Gachoki is the event and the social manager. Lawrence Juma is the assistant events manager. Franklin Ode is the administrator. I am the creative manager. Daniel Orega is the assistant creative manager, and Ivan is the assistant projects lead. So this is the whole management team of the Nairobi DevOps community. Um, if you want to help or participate in our community, you can help us by running workshops, talk on topics that comes easily to you, the one that you're comfortable with. You can connect us to DevOps professional. It will help us grow our community even more. And then you can give us feedback on how we can improve our community. And you can share your ideas on how to make the community better. You can share our post on your social medias or the channels that you have, and you can document our activities and help us organize events. So today the topic is Docker and Docker Compose, and our speaker today is Joseph Njogu. Um, so if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand mid-session. Then your question will be attended. If you need any clarifications, you can just ask or leave it in the comment section on the chat box. So welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, Ivy. Hi, everyone, and I hope I'm audible, right?
Yeah, I
Awesome,
can hear you.
awesome. Okay, now today we are talking about Docker and Docker Compose. Oh, you people said I should turn on my video. Do you need to see me, guys? If you want to see me, hands up. Hey, Victor, no one should be seeing me. It's a virtual thing. Okay, can see you. Hey, Poleni. Now I'll turn on my video. Hi, I hope now you can see me. And yeah, so this is Joseph. I think, oh, yeah, so this is Joseph, DevOps engineer at ArcRide or ARC Ride. No, most of you know me. For those who don't know me, yeah, niko hapa. I'm here. Yeah, and so because today we'll be talking about Docker, let's see where we can start. But I'm happy to see that the question that won on, or rather the answer that won on that polls, if you've ever used Docker or interacted with Docker before. Yeah, so the answer was yes, and that won, which means most of you have interacted or worked with Docker. But maybe for the few who have not, I said, okay, maybe they did not screenshot these. Let's try and share our screen. I'll share everything here. And guys, just make it more interactive. Yeah, Hussein, I can see your hand is up. Is it a question before we start? Or was it, what is it?
Sorry, by mistake. Sorry.
All right. All right. Okay. And I hope you guys can see my screen, right? Or rather, am I sharing anything? Let's see.
Yes, you are sharing. We can see
Okay,
it.
cool. Yeah, so let's start by here. This one are not more important. That is me, my name. So we have Docker here. We have Docker Compose. We have Circle CI. We have Ansible. We have Cloud, and maybe we'll touch on Nginx. But note, for today, we'll just be covering Docker and Docker Compose, because I think we will have a couple of these. I think on coming Saturday, we might be having this Circle CI, which will be physical. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think so. Yeah, so for today, we'll be covering Docker and Docker Compose. So, and I said from this part here, this is a technical session. So have your laptop and be ready to just make your hands dirty. Yeah, so what do we need, or what are the prerequisites for this session? One, be having your laptop, and maybe if you've not installed Docker, just have Docker running on your system. Yeah, so leave alone the very first part which we have there, which is Nginx setup. Let's start with Docker. And what will we be starting with? Yeah, so if you are following through, just check if you have Docker installed, and also ensure you have the latest build or the latest version of Docker. Reason being, if you have Docker Compose and you're running Docker Compose 3.1 to around 3.3, you can run it with the old version of Docker. But if you are running from Docker Compose 3.8, and I think its predecessor, that's 3.9, you can only run it using the latest Docker Compose, or rather Docker version. So that is for the Docker Compose. Now, not that you can't just run it. You remember, if maybe, okay, so to start with this, for you to run Docker Compose, you can, okay, for you to run Docker Compose, you can run it with this command, with up, or with down, or with start, or with stop. But for this to be consistent, if you want to be using this command here, that is Docker Compose, and you have the Docker Compose with the version 3.8 and above, if you have the old Docker version. So you'll be running it with this command here, docker space compose. I hope up to there, maybe you have noticed from your end, that is what happens most of the times. Yeah, so are we still together here, my people?
Yes, yes, we are together.
Awesome, awesome. So this is what we'll do. The very first thing. Okay. All right, guys. So I'll go back to my terminal here, and I hope you guys can also see it. Yeah. So we will navigate to one of my very many projects here and check out the first thing that I want to be taking you through, which is to ensure you have Docker installed. And remember, guys, we are all DevOps engineers, so I don't expect you to, be doing these things manually. I at least expect you to have automated the installation and everything else. So here we have my playbook for the installation. And yeah, this whole part here from line number 19 to line number 49. So we have these script for installing Docker, and ensure before you install Docker for those, okay, and I hope most of you, not most, all of you should be using Linux as a DevOps engineer. So I expect you to have all these installed. These are the dependencies to be installed in your system before you install Docker. Then at least
Joseph,
ensure, yes.
there is a request that you zoom in.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, please, Samuel, or at least be speaking up, because if I go back to my terminal, yeah, sorry guys. If I go back to my terminal, I'll not be seeing this, or rather, I'll not be hearing the messages or seeing anything. Yeah, sorry. Let me try and zoom out. Is that visible? Who raised that issue? Just
Yes,
facts.
it is.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have this small part here. Let me just call it small, which now we talked about you installing these dependencies here. And don't worry guys about this. I think will be on the map, which will look at, that is Ansible, one day, not today though. Yeah, so make sure you have these things installed in your system. Maybe you also understand why we'll need them. Then ensure that we have this, that is, you have the Docker GPG key added to your system. Then you know, in Linux, or rather in Ubuntu, you also need to add the repository, that this thing here. Make sure it's added. If remember, this means that you are using Ubuntu 18.04, or rather, Ubuntu 18.04, which is Bionic or Bionic Beaver, etc. For those in Ubuntu 20, that's think Focal Fossa. For Ubuntu 20.04, I think that's Jamie, if I'm not wrong. And then once that is added, now you need to install Docker Community Edition, and also install Docker Compose. And then when you install Docker in Docker Compose, okay, we all know that for you to install any package or any software in your Linux, you must escalate your privileges, that is by using sudo. And because you've installed using sudo, it will also limit you when running commands which involves that package. And because we don't want to be running Docker using the sudo command, now we need to add Docker in our user group. So, and this is the small part here, which will do that. To that point, I hope everyone has Docker installed. And if we do, can someone raise their hands for me to know we have Docker installed before we now start going into Docker? Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so if we now come back to this here, and okay, let me go back to these slides. Okay. Yeah, this I hate going through the slides when we have a technical thing or a session that we want to do it hands-on. But according to Atlassian, they believe in this: build it, ship it, and run it. Is it a question? Oh yeah, sure. Thanks, Samuel, for sharing that link.
So we will be telling you if there is a question.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so to this point, we'll skip that. Now, we'll talk about Docker in two approaches. And because we've said you build it, you ship it, and you run it, so Docker. When we talk about Docker, we are not going to define Docker because most of you said have interacted with Docker before. So we'll be looking at Docker files in two ways. Docker file, which is just multi-staged, and we'll see what that means, and a Docker file which does not have stages, just like a one file which has just steps on interacting with maybe one application. You're not dealing with multiple applications or multiple containers, I mean by that. So then we look at Docker Compose and its demo. Then you can see here for this snippet here, we have Docker Compose version 3.1, and I think that will be the end. So Docker, that is Docker file, the one with one stage and the other with multi-stage. Then we'll look at Docker Compose. Cool. So I want us to come back here and look at this Docker file here, a very simple Docker file, and we'll see what this file is doing. Now, for those who are new, but you said no one is new. So for those who are new, a Docker file will have this name, that is Docker file with a capital D. And if in your VS Code you have enabled the material design, it will be coming with this logo here for the Docker. This is a ship. I think this is a ship, yeah, or a container, I bet. Yeah, so this Docker file here is used to Dockerize or to containerize your Nginx configuration. Now, as you can see here, we have an Nginx config file, which will now be Dockerized using this file. From here, okay, we have this, for those who do not Dockerize their applications, we'll just have maybe a file by the name Nginx without this extension .conf. But if you are containerizing it, means it must go with this extension. Then you see from here, it's this image, which is now our base image, which we are extending by adding this file. And we ensure that now we are copying this file from our machine or our local machine to this file here, to this folder, or rather to this folder. When you install Nginx, you install in your machine without using Docker, it will go to this folder. Let's try and maybe go there. Have here. When you install most of your applications or rather your softwares in Linux, they do come here. So if you've installed Nginx, you expect it to be in this file or this folder, that is etc. So that's why you see here, we are copying this file to etc because we expect it also to be running on a Linux machine. Then we have this, then we copy this file here. Then using this command, you know, on our websites, the ports that we use most, that is for the HTTP and HTTPS, these we use port 80 and these we use port 443. For you to use this port, it means you must convert this into an SSL enabled site, or you'll be having the CA certificates. Yeah, so I hope to that point we are okay. And then this part here where now I'm running the command, there is another way of doing this. Instead of using the command, you can use this small thing here called entry point. So if you have the entry point, it will have commands, or rather the things that should be doing or should be done for you to reference it as entry point. So like you can see for this part here, we are using an entry point rather than using command. But let's come back here. This is our reference for now. Yeah, so the first thing, you have the base image. Then you extend it by adding other things that you need them to be in that image. That is for Nginx. Now let's look another thing here, Docker file here now, which I think is larger. Okay, yeah, larger than that one. Now, for this one, for those who are familiar with Django or Flask, but let's focus on Django here. For those who are familiar with Django, you know that there are those commands, or rather when you have a new project in Django, things that you do. One, you install the requirements. When you clone the project from, say, GitHub or Bitbucket, you install the requirements. So what do you need? Or rather, okay, maybe let's start here. Django is a Python framework. So our base image will be this one. We'll be using Python 3.8, Slim, and Buster. So it's a very small image here, which we are using. Then we have the environment that we want to be using, Python buffered, and we set it to 1. So like if you set it to 0, it means like you are using the debug mode and put it to 0 or 1. So you are turning it on or off. Then here we make a directory. That is, we want to make our working directory, or rather, yeah, this one here. We want to make our working directory, and by that, we'll create this. But remember, not all the times that you need to be creating this. You can just say working dir and you call it this way without having to create it. But for me, I decided to create it here to be sure. Then you state that the directory that we created is now our working directory. Then we have our requirements here, which you can see it's always on your root folder of your project. We are copying it to this folder. Now, I want you to note something here on this working directory. When you are copying something, the destination, remember we created it like this, so it will have a /, then the name, that is backend. Here, when we are copying, we have this / at the end of this name. This is something that you need to note. If you don't add this, it will not be copying, it will be giving you errors, or it will be like skipping that part and you'll think it has copied and just, it runs silently without doing what you expected. So, quote unquote, having some logical error. Then, because we said it's Django, we need some things to run our PG2 and so we need to install some things here, GCC for C, CURL, and this one, libpq dev. Then, after those are installed, we need to come and install the requirements. One, if you don't have these things installed, it will give you some errors because of the PG2, which is in your requirements.txt. I hope most of you have faced that error. You're not here to cover that error. Then from here, we are saying copy everything in this current working directory to this folder here, or to this directory which we created, which is our working directory. That is done. Then this part here, I'll comment this. This one is not applicable to everyone, but this part is applicable. Now, remember, by default, Django runs on these ports, that is port 8000. So you need to expose this one, because when you're running your application, you also need to be explicitly defining or declaring this is the port that we are using on our Django. But remember, you can always tweak this one and say, I want it to be running on port 8001, or maybe any other port which you know will not be colliding with your other services which are running on other ports. Then we said we have our entry point here, .sh. It's a bash script. So we copy it, and we are copying it to now here everywhere. Then this point here, for those who understand some regex or whatever we call them, regular expressions, we run them against this entry point.sh. Then, because we can be having some errors sometimes, because we these entry point, or rather the initialization scripts, most of the times needs you to be having the permissions to do that. So here you see we are running the chi mode or ch mode, and we are telling it to be executable, this file here, so it will be executable. So here I said not all the time we need to be using command, we can be using entry point. Then you see here we've defined some things. So when you are deploying your Django project, you know there are two web services or web servers that we usually use. One, we use Nginx, and two, we use Gunicorn. I hope that's common to everyone. So for here, we want Gunicorn to be serving our static part of that web, and it should be ran by this which server, binding it to port 8000, that point there, and it's Gunicorn. So I hope if ran Gunicorn somewhere, you understand how that is ran. Then we have this entry point, and what is this entry point doing here? Let's come and see. So you can see, because we are using Postgres, you know, there are those called controlled services or controlled mandates that we need to be giving our Postgres. Sometimes we need it to be restarted. We need to ensure that it's running, and or rather the host and the port that we've defined are up, because sometimes when you run the management commands, say the systemd or the supervisor, you expect this service to be running, and you know it takes some time for it to be started. So this is the work of our entry point here, to ensure that our PostgreDB is running. To that point, we've looked at a one-staged Docker file. So if maybe we come back to here, do we have questions to this point for that stage one, or that rather the Docker file which has only one stage? You have a question? Look, guys, we said we must make it interactive. Don't just keep quiet and you let me just speak. Okay, let me assume there is no question to that point. Now, if you've realized, here we just deployed a backend service, just a backend service. Now try and imagine, not even imagining. Okay. Okay, Ali, tell us more about the entry point SH file and what the said command does. All right. Okay. Was that on Docker file though, Eli? Okay. Now, look at this file here. if maybe you've ran a couple of applications, you understand that there are applications which needs to be restarted or initialized for you to interact with them. Like one, if I can come here before we continue with that, let's see. Let's see, we have project code orchestration. Cool. Yeah, so I hope you can see here. Now here we have another file called init.sh, which again is another type of an entry point.sh, only that with a different kind of name, which is init. So what is this file doing? The reason that's why I've opened this one, because it looks more explanatory, or rather self-explanatory, as compared to the one we have for starting Postgres. Now, for this one, you see the things that it's doing. One, it's setting these credentials to our backend service to enable you to interact with now the UI. So this a Docker command which almost inspects, but now allows you to get into a container and run the commands which you do run when that application is not containerized. So if you see, like here, we got into that container, or rather, if I may go back to this point here. So we have a Postgres, only that we are running it as a local instance. Okay, let's first come here. It does not have what I want. Yeah, so now you see here, we are saying inside this container, do these things, run the commands which have all these things, and ensure that is running, or rather it has executed that and set whatever you wanted to set. So you want to tell it, set this username, set the last name, the password, and the email. Then ensure that all these things have been set and echo if that has happened. Then I think from there, can see here, so you now tell it init. Now to tell it init, initialize, it's something like in Django, if you want to initialize your database, or rather to initialize your project, the first thing you will do when you've installed the requirement, you have the project running, or rather you have it now on your system, the next thing that you do is to say python 3 manage.py make migration. So what have you done? You've initialized your database. So this is the thing by initialization. Now, in our case here, where we are now using this entry point to ensure that this one is running, or rather Postgres is running. So we said this is a bash. So it's the database. Ensure we wait for some few seconds for this to be running. Now, the only thing, okay, you see here we have this, the exec and this $sign and add. The thing that maybe it's not here, you can't just see it, is the command, the management command. That's the systemd, or rather systemctr at Postgres service. That, and you see it will ask for those credentials. Yeah, so the next thing that you are asking is about, see, said, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, so just a minute. Okay, sorry for that. So on that other question on the send command, Ali, I'll give you a homework to work on this, but if you will not have gotten the right answer for this, I'll help you when we have the next session on circles here, because it will be a continuation on this. Yeah, but I see Samuel sent you a link there. Then we have Ebenezer here asking, I noticed you copied and install requirements before copying the other files. Why is that? Yeah, we did that. Cool. Now, one of many reasons as to why we do this, copying the requirements and ensuring that they have been installed. Okay, it's like, okay, let's see, what are we doing here? Now, you have a new project, or rather you want to set up a new Django project. What do you start with? Ebenezer, here, there you are. What do we start with? Do you start by first configuring Django, or do you start installing the requirements? Say you want to first install the virtual env, then create that virtual env, then install the required things. Like say you want to install the Django before you can now bring in any other Django initialization. So where do we start? Ebenezer?
Oh, yeah. So basically start with configuring the env, and then installing the requirements before you actually start the project.
Exactly. That's the same logic, because remember what the 12-factor app says. The prod and dev environment should have that parity. So whatever you do in your prod should be the exact things you do in your dev environment. Okay, I can see Tony here also said something, but yeah, relax, hatujafika hapo, relax, we'll be going there. Yeah, so at least you have the point. We first need to install the requirements before we can bring any other thing in that working environment. Install first the requirements, ensure that everything is up and running. That is for the environment setup before you can now do anything else. I hope I'm making myself clear, or maybe I'm making sense. Yeah, so to this point, is a stage one, or rather a single staged Docker file. Now, as I was saying, you can notice here we only ran, or rather we created, or rather this Docker file will create an image for one service, that is only a backend service. And as we said, you build, you ship, and you run it. Now, we want to also ship our frontend in a Dockerized environment. There was this day I was somewhere and they said they want to host the frontend on Vercel, but they want to Dockerize their backend. Were those people right to do that, guys? So let's look at something else here. Look at projects I have here called these. Okay. Now I have a project here which have a backend and a frontend. If you can all see here, we have a server, which is my backend, and here I have the UI, which is my frontend. And I know most of you are familiar with Angular, so you can see here we have an Angular-based UI, and up here we have a Flask-based backend. So now, how do we couple things and ensure that all of these services are Dockerized, or rather the two services, that is the front end and back end, are Dockerized and deployed as one? Now, this is where we now bring that aspect of having a multi-staged Docker file. One, for it to be multi-staged, or rather for us to, in a normal instance, for us to deploy a front end, or rather a backend, a full stack service or website, or rather an application, you realize that you'll need the web servers that I highlighted before, that is Nginx and maybe Gunicorn. Now, remember in our case now, when you have your front end, you'll use Nginx to act as your reverse proxy, or rather as your web server. So now how do we do that to ensure that our Docker file is containerizing our application and is also containerizing our Nginx, or rather our web server? I know most others use Apache, but now let's look here for our first instance where we are now using this multi-stage build in our Docker file. Here, the first part, what are we doing? This is what we are doing. So this is Angular. Say from this base image here, that is Node version 14.15, and we use the Alpine part of it, or rather, when you see Alpine, you know it's a very small image. I mean, in terms of its weight, MBs, GBs. So it's some small MBs, the Alpine one. So we will call it build. This stage we'll call it build. So again, you see here, we create a directory and we call it app. Then we say our working directory will be that thing here. Now, Ebenezer, if you can see here again, what are we doing? We are copying the requirements, because again, package.json and package.json is also our requirements, but now in our JavaScript frameworks. Now, so you see here, we copy our requirements into our working directory. The next thing we are doing is to ensure that they are installed. After those requirements are installed, or rather the packages are installed, the next thing we do is to copy everything now into our working directory. Then if you've Dockerized your UI, or rather your frontend, you realize that there are where these files are, or rather the builds, where these builds, or rather, like say the dist, or the where the builds are stored in frontends, you'll need some permissions to access them. Or rather, like for instance, here you're seeing like what are we doing here? This command here, we are saying recursively give this permission. I hope I have given it the right permissions, not 777. Yeah, 755. So we want to give this application these permissions: read, execute for the group, for the user who is using this. And you see in other Docker files, you'll have the user, you'll have defined a user. Let me see if I have something like that. Will be a user. Okay. Don't have it here, but we are supposed to also be having some user. Yeah, like here you see who will be the user of this Docker or container will be the VS Code. So you can be having a user whom you give all these permissions, but here you see it's for the group, for the user, and others, I bet. Yeah, so you give them these permissions. Then this is the normal command which you run when on your application, npm run build, but definitely the environment is prod. Then that one is saved as build. For the next stage, if you've hosted your frontend using Nginx, you know that this build, which is now stored in your dist folder, is supposed to be copied to your Nginx files for it to be served. Then you can see here now, in our stage 2, we want to use Nginx as our web server. So what do we do? The first thing we are doing is to copy everything that we build, that is from build, and the thing which will be from that build which we are copying is not now just the application files. We are copying the builds. Leave this name alone here. This is what we are copying. We are copying the dist into this folder called HTML in our Nginx. But now you see here now in our Nginx, we are going to user, share, Nginx, then HTML, right? This is where we've copied our our builds in Nginx. Then the next thing, remember, we must be having our configuration file for Nginx for us to copy it in here in the etc now. Now see what we are copying in our etc. It's the Nginx configuration, but the builds, we are copying them in this folder called HTML. And maybe if we can take a quick look at this, you see when you are serving uh, your your service, you see where you come to look for it. You say try these files. It has this URI / index.html, but you've already defined the route where you are supposed to be getting that. We said it's in the user, share, Nginx, and you copy them here. So you look for index.html, index.htm. That is for Nginx. We're not looking at Nginx for today. Yeah, then remember again, these permissions keeps on disturbing, or you need to be setting them every other time if you don't want to be having errors. Not all the time though, but some instances or at some points you'll find yourself configuring these permissions. So again, we want to recursively own this folder here. This is the folder that we are owning. Not everything which is in here, but whatever is in this folder is what we are recursively giving these permissions, the 755. Then for Angular, I think it runs on this port 4200. But remember again, it's 4200, but you want it to be mostly be accessible using port 80, which is our HTTP port. Yeah, so to that point, do we have questions for the multi-stage build?
Um, Joseph, I think there are no questions. It's just a Google user who has posted something on the chat, which is an additional thing. But maybe for the sake of those who are new to Docker and everything, Docker and Docker Compose, maybe you can just give them a brief definition, not a brief, maybe you can just go to what is Docker Composed, why should people use them, like for the sake of those who voted that they have never used Docker before.
Okay, okay, okay. Now, that's a bad thing because it's not in my slides. I assumed we are not new in Docker. So what's Docker? Docker is an open source tool which is used to create standardized units of applications, which we call them containers. That's how we Dockerize, or rather, that is the work of Docker. For Docker Compose, for you to use Docker Compose, you create an instance where you want to be using multi containers and run them as one service, or rather run them once, because most probably these containers or these services depend on each other. So for Docker, you create Docker images or Docker containers, which we've said are standard units of applications, so they are standardized in a containerized approach. Then for Docker Compose, you are now it's an instance where you now don't want to just run one container, but multi containers. So it's a tool for running multi containers, or rather multiple containers at once. Yeah, so again, Docker Compose is still open source. Guys, I think you will give me a minute.
Okay, so as we wait for him, I think I can be responding to that question, Ivy. So basically, when you are using you will use Docker when you want to containerize applications. And the reason why you're containerizing applications is because you want your applications to be lightweight, and since when you're working in DevOps, you're going to work in a distributed system, a system that will need to be automated, you need it to scale. You are going to use containers because they will enable you, there are technologies that can enable you to scale easily when you're using containers. So something like Kubernetes. So you can use containers to package your application. The containers will only contain the dependencies of your application and everything the application requires in order to run, plus the code of that application. And then you're able to run that application. So instead of, let's say, having a server, and a server may have more than you require. So in order to ensure that you can deploy applications faster and be able to scale, that is why you would like to use Docker. So, and then Docker Compose will allow you to orchestrate, because with Docker you can create you can create containers separately. But in case you want to spin up all containers or different services that are linked within the Docker ecosystem, you can use Docker Compose to do that. I've also shared here an article on shell scripting for the person on Linux permissions for a Google user. You had asked how permissions work. So permissions are just some rules that you give to your files, so that people can either access it or that define how your file should be accessed or interacted with. So there are 3 permissions that you can give, that is read, write, and execute. So if you want someone to read, you give them the permission to read. If you want them to be able to write into your file, you give them the permission to write. And if you want them to execute, you give that permission. So those are the permissions that exist, but you can go and read that article and you'll be able to learn more about it.
Yeah, thank you, Samuel. Kwa mzazi ni gumu at run. Anyway, yeah, so from Ali was asking if these two tools are different. Yeah, they are 2 different tools. And as I've listened to what Samuel has told you, maybe I should add something to it. When you have containers, you need an orchestrating tool to run those containers. So one, we have Docker Compose and we have Kubernetes, amongst others. So that's why we have Docker and Docker Compose. And yeah, they are 2 different tools. So I hope I left that there. Yeah, and also look at those file, it's called Linux files permissions and ownership. I think Samuel should also add ownership in it for chown or chion for them to understand. Cool. So to this point, this is where we were. So we have this, we have our build, and we have our Nginx already configured. So we'll look at Nginx maybe the next time, but let's go now to our Docker Compose file here. Now, for this, I want you to notice something, and I hope I have a different project which have a different approach to this. Yeah, cool. So we have a Docker Compose file here, which is version 3. And as you can see, the services part of it, and we have the networks part of it. And also other things to note, we also have volumes part of it, but for today we don't have volumes for this one. So, but I think I had it here, only that, yeah, sure. Yeah, so let's start from here. Now, from here, what are we doing here when deploying our project or rather our application? We are orchestrating and building on the go. So here we using the context which is in this UI folder. Remember, when you say Docker build and maybe you tag your image, it'll come to this folder which you've given it, or rather you've declared here or defined, and look for anything called Docker file or anything with this name, Docker file. So we said here the context that will be used is in this folder. So when this service, or rather this declaration, goes to this folder, the UI, it will look for Docker file, and it will call now the container. Now here you name your container. It will name it UI. Then this part here depends on, I know you are also familiar with this here, links, and you can define what are you linking to. So always works almost like that bit for depends on. So I think you should also do some reading on that, but just let's use what we have here. Then this means that for this service to be running, it will depend on this other service here, which you are calling it server. When you link it here, you just telling it for you to be running, it also depends on that service. Then you see I've commented out this line here. I'll tell you why, but first let's continue. Then we have networks. You see here we have networks, and I said use internal only. Again, I'll say why. Then we have here a service, which we said for you UI to be running, you need that service. This is now our backend server, or rather our backend. If we come back here, I said this server is Flask based. Now this one is not Django based. So you can see from here, again, the base image that we are using is for the Python Slim. Now here we are using Python 3.10 Slim, or rather 3.10 Slim. Then here, remember what I said about this one. So you can either put that, or rather the end as true, 1, 0, or false, depending on what you want to set it. Then here, you see the working directory here, we call it here. Now you can see from here, we are not creating a working directory like the way I was doing, run, make directory, and give it a name. Now here, the end that we have is the up home and this one. So the working directory is this. Then we are saying here, now you can see here now again, we just copied everything. I hope you people understand that Flask is lightweight as compared to Django. So you see here, I just did a very what, a cake thing to copy everything, yes, to this point here, which is our working directory or a current working directory. And now from here, now run the requirements, or rather install the requirements. Then you see here now, I'm not even saying expose. I'm just defining it as an environment. I'm defining it as an environment. And now the port that I want to use is port 8001. But remember, which port does Flask run on? I think Flask runs on port 5000. But you see here, I said this is the port that we'll be using. Again, this leave it alone. It's not common to everyone, because I don't think it's everyone who is using Google Cloud. You know, some of us are using AWS. So then here you can see we are using GUnicorn again to run, or rather to serve our static content of this application. And I hope you know all this thing. Yeah, to that point. So this is our server, and this is its Docker file, which again you can see it's one staged. Then the one which you're using here, or rather we are looking at for the front is this. Then when you come back to our Docker compose file here, so you see we created this, the server, and said, now the context, use the folder, this folder server, and the Docker file which is there, build an image out of that. Then the networks that I've exposed here, I'm just supposed to expose, okay, yeah, both of them. I'll also say why. So we have internet and internal only. Then most of the time for my domain names and my other configurations for tunneling, I do use Cloudflare. That's why you can see it here. And then you have to define your networks down there. Now, I said I've commented out this one. Now, if you look at the security aspect of Docker Compose, or rather when we were doing networking in campus sometimes back, you maybe we are told, or rather if I was told, is if you are not using a certain port, or rather for security reasons, ensure you've closed any open ports and they are not being used. Now, because here I said we are using the networks, which is internal and internet, I don't need to be using the ports. But remember, in my Docker Compose, in my Docker file rather, I exposed this one. This command is different from when you just define it as a port. You just exposed that, but it's not defined just the way you've done here. But again, you can still come here and say expose this port, which will be different from this approach which I have here for the ports. Yeah, so when you have this network parameter, or rather networks, you see we have internal only, and we have the internet. And you can see here, defined down here, they are using a driver which is a bridge. Now, when you have this, or rather when you say you want to use the internal only, what do you mean? Now, for this UI, you want it to be accessing the contents of this server, or rather this service internally, not through the internet. So which means if you try and accessing this, the contents of this server by the internet, you get nothing. So again, you see, you are trying to just have some security precautions by using the internal only networks. Then here, you can see that we have both. We have the internal and we have the internet. So this means for this server, it will be accessing, or rather this service, the UI will be accessing this server internally only. This bit here, if we come back to server, you see we have the Google Drive, and rather the work that this thing is doing is accessing some files which are stored on the Google Sheets. So for us to access them, we'll need the internet. So that's why you can see here, we are saying also use the internet to be able to access those things. Then remember, now this we are using Cloudflare as our tunnel, or when you use Cloudflare, you can also you are also using it as your Nginx, or rather as your proxy server. And to do that, you see, this one depends on our UI, which means when you came to your Nginx and you copied the build files to your Nginx, it's the same thing that you are doing here. Now, for you to be accessing the contents of this UI, you'll be doing internal only. But remember, for us to now access this website, or rather this application, we want to be accessing it using a HTTPS URL. So that is why we have this. I said my Cloudflare will be giving me the domain name. So the domain name, you see we have the tunnel here, and it has some commands which are run for you to access it. Again, not go into the ins and outs of Cloudflare because I know not everyone uses this. Yeah, so this one approach of Docker Compose, where you are building on the go and running those services. So if we say Docker Compose app, let's see, yeah, say Docker Compose app, and also in a detached mode, you'll see it will be doing these, creating those services, and it's also doing it on the go. Now, as that runs, let's try and open something else with a different approach of that Docker Compose. Rather, let me look at this one which I had. Yeah, I hope you can all see this. Let's see. Okay. This one is still building from there. Yeah, so you can see it's still building. on the go. Yeah, so let's see what we have here. Okay, have this Docker Compose. I hope I'm not exposing the credentials. All right, yeah. So from here, we are using a 3.1 version of Docker Compose. And the reason as to why I've said maybe a different approach, one, when we had those Docker files, you can be creating your images and pushing them to your container registry, that is Docker Hub or maybe CR or GCIO. But now, for that first approach, what were we doing? We are not pushing or publishing our images to any registry, but rather we are building them on the go and running them on the go. Now for this one, you can see here, I'm trying to pull the content of, or rather I'm using an image, which is Odoo 15.0, and I'm pulling it directly from Docker Hub. We look at another service here, which is now the PostgreSDB. Again, I'm using an image. You see, I'm not building on the go, but rather I'm pulling something which is already on Docker Hub, or rather its container registry. Then you come again to this service here, which is now our custom service, or that we created. And this is the image. I'm pulling it from this repository called ArcDocker1, and the service is called Odoo service, and the tag that I'm pulling is latest. But now if we come down here, you see this is what we had initially. This bit here, this is what we had. We were building on the go and running it. But now from this part here, you see, we are just pulling images which are already on Docker Hub. So what happens to this point, or what should we be doing for us to be having images on Docker Hub? Now, let's where do we go? Let's see. Yeah, yeah. So let's just try and do this. One, for you to publish an image, okay, or rather, okay. Oh, naweza kuchanganya kule. See, and now from here, we have this Docker file. Let's see. Yeah, it will be doing this, that, and this. So if we say Docker build, kama hivi, then you give it a name, say quality, and maybe you tag it latest. Okay, maybe I'm running my own things, but yeah. So Docker build, you target and ensure. Okay, one, first you need to be having your account set, that is on Docker Hub. Yeah, cool. So when you're here, you're supposed to create. What are you doing? You're supposed to create a repository so that you can see. Let's call it quality. Call it just public, and yeah. Yeah, so you see, when you have repository, you have something like this. With that, when you are building your image, so when you are in that process of building your image, you'll have to give that image, like say here you have that image, and when you are building, okay, I have to come back here, my guys. You are okay. We are building. Where are we building? We are building. Yeah, this one here. So you have the image name, and remember the format of that image name. Okay. Okay, Docker build and what? Okay, find that and call it quality, and we say it will be latest. Then that flag with T is the tagging. Then where are we building from is that current working directory. Okay. Let's see. The tag then. What happened today? I also came to present on the build without having configured my things. All right. Yeah, so but basically that's what we are supposed to be doing. Let me go back here. Yeah, from my script here. Yeah, so we're supposed to Docker build, you tag that image and you give it a name. And remember the way we said the image name should be, because remember when we'll be pushing it to this repository. So it should be having, or rather containing, the repository name, or rather the owner and the name of that repo, or the name of that image.
Joseph, we have a question on chat.
Hey, Ivy.
There's a question on chat. Are there any other security considerations that devs should be aware of when using Docker containers apart from not exposing ports, as you have mentioned?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can see that question. Yeah, again, we all know when you are working with version controlled environment, one of the very many rules they tell us, or they say, which should be there, is don't push your environmental variables on your version controlled environment. Again, the environmental variables, these are the likes of .env, those ones. So don't push them on your version controlled environment. Remember again, Docker will also be acting as your version controlled environment, because remember you are still versioning while still on your Docker, or rather Dockerizing your applications. Yeah, so one thing you need to consider is using environmental variables without having to hard coding them into a Docker compose. So like what we had, let me bring that back before I see what happened with my builds here. Yeah, like what we have here. This bit, yeah, like for instance, you see here, we have this variable, environmental variable password, and it's not exposed. But again, because here I exposed some, not again a good approach, because all these are supposed to be on your .env and reference them using this parameter here, which is used to reference your variables which are in your .env. Yeah, so this is one thing, security consideration should be checked, the environmental variables, or rather the .env. I hope it's clear on that. Yeah, so this should be the best approach to handle it. Or if you're not using this approach for the environment parameter, you can go with the env file, which will now be referencing the, let's come here down. Yeah, this approach here, where you're now referencing the whole .env file, which has all your environmental variables. Yeah, so if you're not using environment as a parameter, use the env underscore file to reference that whole file. Hope that question is answered. Okay, now guys, we'll still be having a continuation on this. So this thing that failed on my build, I think I'll answer a question on that day. And sorry for that part which did not work. Yeah, so if maybe you have any other questions apart from that last bit.
I think there are no questions on the chat. Maybe if there is anyone who would like to ask.
Yes, please, if any.
Anyone with a question? Okay, I think there is none.
All right. Thanks, guys.
So will you be able to share the code you're using so that people can also try to follow along on anything?
No, yeah, okay, yeah, I think I have an, let's open my you want me to share that, really? Let's open the
Share
my,
the link, the GitHub link.
I think I have something workable for that. So let's look at my GitHub. Okay, let's give it a moment as it loads. Mhm. I think I have this repository here, which is called Strain Reverse API. Yeah, on this one.
You can share that link in the WhatsApp group here and also in the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's there. I think that has everything. This is what we were working on. Let me see. String reverse. Yeah, this one. This is the one that we we had this. We started with all these, and it also have these. Okay. Yeah, that is it, but this will be the next bit, so we'll be covering that and maybe the why that bit has not worked for today.
Okay, so you're done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and thank you everyone for joining. So we've come to the end of the session. And in case you have questions, you can ask the questions in our WhatsApp group, and they will be responded to. So in case you are not in our community, you can join. So Ivy, do you want to share the QR codes so that they can scan?
Yeah, sure. Let me share it.
So next Saturday, we have a physical session, and we look forward to seeing you guys there. And then next month, we have a DevOps Summit that is coming up. So
I hope my screen is visible.
yes, it is.
So these are the QR codes to our social media platforms. You can just scan it. It will lead you right up to the.
Lawrence has also shared on the chat the links. So you can also use the link that Lawrence has shared on the chat to join to access all of them. Okay, so see you guys in the next week event, and also in the upcoming DevOps Summit. And we are also organizing, some of us are organizing the DevOps Days, Nairobi version. So we'll be giving you more information on that as well. So have a good night and a good week ahead.
Thank you guys for joining.